Hey, Anna and Craig. My name is Nate. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me on the Geekcentric podcast. How are you
Thanks
both
for
doing
having Nate.
today? Yeah,
Hi, Nate.
doing well,
We're
doing
happy
well.
to be here.
Dope, dope. I mean, I have to tell you, I only watch Yellowjackets with headphones on.
Oh, that's
you're,
so
it's
good.
Thank
it's
you.
the
Thank
best.
you.
I
Thank
got
Seriously.
you
my
so much.
AirPods Pros, and they're just booming on my ears. And
You
your
need
music
that
just
bass. There's a lot of sub.
there's a lot, especially this season. I've noticed there's a lot of sub.
hmm
Um,
It's because I got subs installed just before the season, so we've just been really um, exploring the lower frequencies,
I love it. I love it.
rumbling bowels.
Yeah, my cheeks are jiggling. I wanted to start off with, before we get into the Yellow Jackets of it all, I wanted to start off with a question that one of my favorite composers, Michael Giacchino, actually asked some of his fellow film composers at a panel at D23 last year that I got to attend, which is, if each of you could pick one TV or film score that you didn't work on that best represents you as a person, what one would you choose?
I'm gonna go with either Fellini 8.5 or classic Warner Brothers cartoons.
Depending on the day. Depending on the day.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
it.
Or just like all at once, just
That's
one
really
one
funny.
grafted on the other.
I feel I feel like I'm somewhere between like Splendor in the Grass and Tootsie,
That's great.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, kind of like emotional and melodramatic and melancholy, but sweet too.
Of
hmm
course. Of course. I went with The Incredibles for me.
Oh,
Just because
that's
I think
cool.
there's times
Oh,
where I like to be
great.
boisterous and loud, and I don't know. I like to think that I could be a hero, but probably not. Especially in some of the situations all these incredibly amazing young women get into in
Oh
this
boy.
show. Oh my gosh.
Amazing young women, but also like you guys, you're not.
Get it together.
It's not going well.
No.
You're not
Um,
behaving
So
well.
scary.
Yeah,
well, speaking
Well, the
of
wilderness is deciding.
that's
yeah,
true.
yeah, and speaking of the emotions that I think we connect with in those different scores that you had mentioned that you connect with. There's so much emotion in this show, and there's so much emotion in the music
Thank
of this
you.
show.
That's great.
I feel it, and for each of you, I want to know, what is maybe your favorite emotion to score for, and are there any that prove more technically challenging than others?
That's a really good question
hmm
for us on this show because I feel like we go in very opposite directions in a way when it comes to that. Like, now I'm going to answer for Craig. Like, I feel like the cave for you was it was such a like perfect exploration of all your different sides in terms
Yeah,
of
cave was great because we did get to go from that deep, dirty soil roots creakiness sub stuff that we were talking about to like Rosemary's Baby level
yeah,
drama emotion to um, Badalmente Twin Peaks
yeah,
to traditional, untraditional Yellow Jackets, like female voices and, angelic and devilish. So it's sort of these contrasts. For me, it's really hard to choose one. I know that, like, when Anna and I are working on it, we both sort of default to certain things. Like, I think frequently if you've started a cue or a theme, then those cues get tossed to you a lot, and that can get a little bit limited and limiting. So then we try and pay attention to that so that if Anna's doing too much emotional stuff or I'm doing too much horror stuff, then we'll flip it. You take some horror, I'll take some, melodrama or whatever it is, because it definitely
I
one of the
prefer the
joys of Yellow
melodrama.
Jackets. What's that? Yeah. But I
I
love
prefer
melodrama.
that.
But
I
one
know, I
of
know.
the joys of Yellow Jackets is you get to literally explore every room of the haunted mansion
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
emotionally and energetically, I guess. Whereas a lot of shows, it's sort of one, you're in one one tone, one world, or a more limited sort of color bandwidth. But with this, it's everything. It's just human. It's very operatic that way.
I really love when we get the opportunity, like, because this show, it's like the emotion is so raw and violent a lot of the time. And so some of my favorite scoring moments are when we actually get to experience real, like, sadness, or like where it kind of slows down for like a second and there's a human feeling with a conscience that we don't really get to have very often. And so
and one that
those are some of
sustains.
my favorite moments. Yeah.
It's nice when you can sort of have a scene where you can, because the storytelling is so fast and furious, and we really, really try and help, sometimes in an almost Warner Brothers, like horror Warner Brothers-y way, where it's like, whoa, there's so much information in the scene, relationship and storytelling wise, we need to like be super surgical, and it can be like a thrill ride. It's nice when we're able to stay in a single relationship or a single emotion for, more than 30 seconds.
Yeah, and it's also new territory for some, especially in this season. I feel like there's actual, like, we start digging into real emotion, and that's been fun to kind of flip around musically for us.
What do you mean flip around?
Like, let's say Misty. Adult Misty has been, a true joy to put music to because she's so kooky and bizarre and a murderer. But like a lovable murderer. And then, but like she's evolving emotionally or devolving emotionally. And so it's been fun to kind of go, well, what's Misty's emotional musical tone? Like the adult Misty.
Yeah, and to help...
It's interesting.
And to help her evolve from... not cartoonish has like a negative valence. I don't mean it that way. She's like wonderfully a kind of cartoon of a person.
Yeah.
And the performance is that way, and she's written that way. So it started off in season 1 in a sort of more TV land, like fantasy land score theme for Misty. And then this season, it's like gotten super... by the end of the season, it gets way more grounded. Way more... there are more dimensions to it. So we've been talking a lot about that as these characters are developing for better and for worse. And how to subtly transition that, help them transition, particularly in the third season when people's roles really start to change and you start getting more and more insight, deeper insight into their trauma and why they are the way they are as adults. And how to sort of, Sherpa that musically and sonically.
Interesting. And guide them through their insane journeys. I do absolutely, though you mentioned some of the adult Misty stuff. I love her with Walter so much, and the music that accompanies them just always it's kind of bouncy. It always makes me feel like I'm on like a fun mystery adventure. And then to double back to young Misty and getting some of the more depth with her, it's absolutely fantastic. Now, speaking of things changing this season, the season literally changes, and I read for that's for season 2 that you both watched footage of like bears and quiet winter streams.
That's right.
What were some of the things you watched for inspiration for season 3?
All we watched was Yellowjackets this season. We set out to find a nature channel at first.
Yeah.
Well, we tried to watch some frogs because there are some frogs that come into play.
Oh, okay.
But the fake frogs, the animated frogs in the episode, in the temporary animated frogs that they were using, as placeholders in the cuts that we were scoring, were way more fun, trippy, and cool than the real nature frogs.
So it's so boring, the frogs. Like, bears are really interesting.
Yeah.
The frogs, it was just like,
Okay.
We incorporated a lot more nature sound this
we did,
season.
yeah.
So there are frogs and birds and
Trees.
owls and trees and mutations of those sounds, like sort of monstrous psychedelic mutations of those sounds. And so we really felt like we were on some kind of nature thrill ride the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think we needed
Well,
the bears as much this season.
not as much. But Anna, speaking of the noises and mutating them, I think my favorite element. I mean, this show is a mystery box, and I love a good. I'm a huge losty. Okay, I already brought up Michael Giacchino. Sorry, but I love a mystery box show. But I love how the score for this show is also a mystery box, and I'm always listening to it and trying to pick apart. Okay, what was that, or what was that sound? What are some of your favorite, maybe unconventional sounds or instruments that you've utilized? Maybe even items that you've utilized this season.
well, first I want to say thank you
Yeah.
for making it a scavenger hunt, because
So much
that is
fun.
that there are often times where Craig and we're constantly thinking of it like that. And we're like, does anyone actually care?
Yeah.
So you do. And so now it's just for you. It's all for you.
We wrote the score for you.
That really makes me feel like all the time is well spent.
Yeah, totally. Especially Anna's brain particularly works like that.
Yeah, well, I'm also like so obsessed with this show. Okay, go ahead.
So I'm gonna give away a little under the hood secret, right? I'm gonna talk about a piece of gear, which was really which was like kind of the sound of the forest this season, which there's this like
A lot of creaking
underneath almost everything in the wilderness now, and it's called, excuse me, it's a little modular Eurorack synth called Forge Time.
Okay.
I don't know what it does, but it's possessed by the devil.
Yeah.
And it really, really, it was like having a third band member that was a robot. That was an evil robot this season.
It's almost like AI. Because I've never even touched it, but I'm like, can you bloop Aquila for me? And then
It goes,
he puts it in there and then doesn't touch anything or twists a little knob. And then all of a sudden we have this whole new soundscape.
yeah.
Pretty rad.
I think that first came up with Coach Ben in episode 1, where he's like trudging through, but then it really took over in the cave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it became like a bed for the rest of the season.
There was also a moment where, like, it sounded like if you took a goat and shrunk it down and shook it vigorously.
Yeah.
That's Anna. That's Anna. That's Anna's voice singing.
That's Anna. Oh my gosh. Okay.
But actually, I don't do it like that. It's a vocal that we've treated in a certain way. But yes, that became a real go-to this season.
Goat 2.
Wow. Well, because I read another interview. I've been reading up on both of you quite a bit. I read another interview with you, Craig, where you mentioned being obsessed with vocal harmonies, and that's even just bringing up your voice, Anna, here and talking about the goat of it all. Like, how many of those sounds am I hearing come directly from you two, or you know what I mean?
Oh, the majority.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of stuff that we use from Caroline Shaw, who was on the pilot. And so we've incorporated a lot of that material, and then we had her come in for season 2. And so it's really, it's, some of it is her, but so much of it is just us.
And then my assistant, Simone Wilson, who during Yellowjackets becomes our assistant as Anna and I merge into one.
Yes.
He's just an exquisite singer.
Oh, fantastic.
And a really good vocal arranger too. So his voice is in there occasionally, and some of his sort of harmonic sensibility sneaks in. It's pretty cool getting to work on a voice forward score. I wouldn't say it's a vocal score because there's so much sound, but it's definitely
It's
that's
pretty vocal.
there's a lead singer in this band, and it's all
Yes.
the voices.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, and I love it. I mean, it's the first thing that I noticed as like one of my favorite things about this series when I first started watching it. It was just like, wow, listen to these noises, listen to the guttural breathing. There are times where I have to take my headphones off and just sort of take a breath, not just
Yeah.
because the show is so intense, but the music itself. Is there ever times where, for you two, while you're composing, you have the ideas of what you're composing to? Have you ever had to just sort of take the headphones off, take a break,
Yes.
sit back, and just go, "That's a lot."
Yeah.
Has it ever been too scary?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
For Anna, it has been, yes.
Yeah. Not for
Particularly,
you.
well, it's not so much scary for me. It's just too dense sometimes. I'm like, I got to get out of the thicket, just
Well,
like
Yes.
a
what
little
about
bit
when
of
you were
sunshine, a
working?
little bit of.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes. 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 But sometimes this stuff will hit home, and
Hmm.
a
Mm.
lighter version of that would be, I remember during the LA fires, we were still working like around the
Wow.
clock. As much as we could focus, it was very difficult.
It was really hard.
Um, it was really hard. My whole family is here, and so it was just
Mm.
chaotic, but some people had to evacuate. Anyhow, um, he was working on a scene that had fire in it.
Mm.
I remember, and he was like, "This is kind of too much."
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it was just a lot. It was just
Yeah.
too much emotionally. I mean, I get that way a lot. I spend a lot of time with Shauna and the character, and it's a lot. It's a lot to go through. She's a mother, I'm a mother, you know. And
Season
last season with
two,
all the pregnancy and the
Shauna
baby
Burke
and
stuff.
everything, like,
Yeah,
oh, that really
it's very
hit
intense.
home in certain ways, not in others. And it was just very emotional. But I mean, the whole thing, it just sucks us in. Like this season, I mean, I'm still kind of withdrawing from those being the only people I see.
Yeah,
Mm.
and of
Yeah.
course, Jeff. I'm so Jeff that
Are you also amazing
it's
at
like
announcing
mirror,
bingo numbers, Craig? You're really good at.
I would
like
imagine he would be.
freakishly good. Yeah, really dumb
Um,
dad jokes about bingo numbers. Yep, I
I
can do
love
it.
Yep.
it. I love it.
Yes.
Um, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the senses. And Craig, I saw in an interview with you that you had touched upon synesthesia in your songwriting before. Does Yellowjackets have a specific sonic color palette? And if so, what do you think
Interesting.
some of those colors are?
Well, it sort of depends on the season, right? Like this
Mm.
season feels it's dirt. It's like brown and black for
Mm.
me.
Yeah.
Um, and
There's
then
like some
occasion.
army green when we're in the wilderness. It's brown
Hmm.
and black and army green for me.
But then
Yeah.
when I think of last season, it's more tundra, like glacial, white. Even though
More
there's snow in
blues.
both seasons and dirt
Yeah.
in all of the seasons, but
But then the
Yeah.
adults, it's different because they're shot differently and they're lit
mhm,
differently and they are different and they're free-ish.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a very specific moment that with Ben this season. I think it was in one of the last couple episodes that have just aired, where
Poor
he's
guy.
just giving a monologue, and it's such a phenomenal
Oh,
performance. But the music in that moment, I was like, I felt it felt bright, it felt elevated, and it's a plea for life in
yeah,
that situation. It's a very dark thing that's happening, but the
yeah,
music kind of felt like, look where we've come from.
yeah,
And I sort of got the sense of sort of yellows and whites, but then very quickly we start to get back to those browns, those
yeah.
yeah.
blacks, those
There, yeah.
right.
First of all, again, thank you
Yeah.
for paying attention. It's
Yeah.
For sure.
huge. Means so
Yeah.
much. We're just going to call you every morning before we
Let's
get to
chat.
work.
For sure. Yeah, of
But
course.
Look out
but
for
but
this.
but I agree with you. You get these like bursts of color, but they're it's just kind of fake outs because you always wind up in like a burial. It feels like a burial,
Hmm.
a lot of the time. It's like being pulled under the earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Brown
yeah,
and
it's really
gray.
intense.
Brown and gray. So, I mean, I think this score, as I've just been kind of being all giddy here chatting with you guys about this, I very much feel like it does stand in the forefront alongside the performances, alongside the story, alongside the visuals.
Thank you.
And in terms of standing in the forefront with the story, I wanted to know in terms of the production side of things, how much, obviously, you're both given quite a bit of freedom. You've talked about the amount of freedom that you've been given to explore, and you've had even more freedom doing this than in your previous musical endeavors. And so I wanted to sort of ask, are there ever times where your music has affected the way a scene was written, or have you ever had the opportunity to sort of get that way in terms of the collaboration and actually push the story in a different direction because of decisions you made with the score?
Interesting.
I think yes. There are definitely times when
Yeah.
we're meeting with the producers to go through the episode with temp music where we'll start talking about maybe the direction of a scene and where to kind of go with it, where we'll start pulling in the psychological aspects of what's going on. And then it can take it into a whole other level of layering, whether it's the adult versions. We've started bringing in things from the past,
Hmm.
like kind of like origin music, story music, or vice versa, with when they're younger, and we can flash forward to, oh right, that's that sound from later, but this is where it started. And that's something
Cool.
that we oftentimes get to with the producers when we're talking about scenes where they don't even think of it like that, but we do.
Mm.
So that's been
It, it,
that's
it,
cool. I love that when that
it'd be an
happens.
interesting question for the producers to know if any of the music we've made, because there's been such a meld of sound and story and visual, um, if they think at all about different themes or cues or anything in the writer's room or as they're editing. I mean, certainly the editors are pulling in, we now have like a fairly vast for 3 seasons library of Yellowjackets music. So most of the time when the editors are editing, they'll be putting in temporary placeholders using our music instead of just anything from out there, other scores in the world, which is usually what happens. So, so I would imagine that if editors are pulling from our Yellowjackets library and cutting to it, it probably affects the trajectory of things, but in that sort of natural way, not really in like a preconceived way.
It's cool. It sounds very cyclical. It sounds very much like it's you're influencing them, they're influencing you back and forth, and
It's very collaborative. It feels
yeah.
extremely creative and lively.
Yeah, it
Well,
does.
on the topic of collaboration, both of you are working together. You mentioned that we're in the third season. We've got so much music that you've composed together. I wanted to ask, both of you coming from your backgrounds in your very own bands, there's no doubt that you've experienced the
No, we weren't
joys
in No
and
Doubt. I was in Shudder to think she was in That
sorry.
Dog.
Yeah. There's those dad jokes coming. No,
Thank you.
but but experiencing the joys and challenges of collaboration. Before we started recording, Craig, I told you that I was in a band myself, so I've felt the highs and lows of collaboration. But sticking with the highs, is there anything that both of you find that now you can do together that you would have never been able to accomplish on your own?
Oh
Yellowjackets.
yeah,
Yellow
like on
jacket.
a pretty routine basis. There's a there are ways in which we collaborate that we are aware of, like complementarily, and then ways that we probably don't even know about or see. But there's no question that neither of us would be creating the score that you hear alone or with somebody else. So there's some kind of weird, fun, funky chemistry, or what's the word when you turn lead into gold? What is that?
Alchemy.
Alchemy. There's
Maybe?
nice alchemy
I don't
that
know.
happens.
That's
Yeah,
what I'm going
alchemy.
with.
That's the name of
That
our
was the word.
band,
That was the word I was looking
Alchemy.
for. Alchemy.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think we're the Geekcentric podcast, so I would be remiss if we didn't quickly jump in on some Easter eggs. We're always looking for Easter eggs. I want to know, in terms of, you already mentioned the concepts of sort of having some sounds that you're putting in here because you're like, that's going to come up later, that sort of thing. For both of you, are there any sort of dope sonic Easter eggs that you've managed to sneak into the show that you're particularly proud of?
There are, and because I remember moments where we're like, ooh, for the deep nerds, they're going to
It's
really
true.
dig that. But I don't remember what they
Me
are.
neither.
Oh no!
I
Well,
don't
Oh,
remember.
the tree
Yeah.
burp. There's
Yeah.
a tree burp.
Oh, the tree burp. It's the best.
sorry, you're gonna have to elaborate.
Yeah.
The tree
There,
burp.
Pay attention to
there's
the
a
trees.
sound. Yeah,
Yeah.
just there's a sound that the trees make. Well, the trees have their theme this season. But in particular, it's sort of let's call it the lead vocal hook of the trees. We call it the tree burp. And it kind of sounds a little bit like molten indigestion. It's like
Okay.
and it's
But it
really
also
bassy and deep.
But it also reminded us of the Alka-Seltzer commercial.
That's what I think. That's the indigestion from the 70s, because we're that old.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay, the tree burps. I'm gonna
Yeah,
have
the
to
tree
pay
burps are really
closer
good.
attention. None of those are your actual burps,
No.
though. Those are.
No,
No.
they're not burps at all. They're not
No,
burps
we
at
just
all.
call it a tree burp.
I love it. I love it. Very cool. Well, the final question I have for both of you, as we kind of get to the end of this conversation, went by way too quickly, is talking about, we're talking about trees and tree burps and the natural world, but how your score just, it goes so nice with the progression of this show, because as I said, like, I'm a big fan of Lost, and I love how that show, very quickly starts diving into the mystery. This show very quickly starts diving into the mystery.
Oh, yeah.
And so I wanted to know, from the standpoint of the supernatural world, what do you think, for each of you, what do you think is the relationship between music and the supernatural?
I mean,
So fun.
music to me is supernatural.
Yeah.
I always think of supernatural or of magic, like MIMAGICK, as mysteries that we haven't been able to pin down materially or scientifically. And that's literally almost everything that exists, because mostly we know this much. And music, for me, taps into that collective magic, right? There are things about music that you can frame in material or scientific or mathematical terms, but those are just tools. Those aren't music. Those are just ways to sort of organize music. Music, the strata of like vibration, right, that rules the universe, we get to, like lightning rods, sort of channel it. That's magic.
Yeah, it is. It's
Absolutely.
very crazy to take something either that just hits you or that's very internal and make it into something that one can see or hear or feel.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
weird and great, and I'm grateful for
Yeah,
it.
it's like you're creating like material portals into immaterial realms or something. Especially with some of the music on this show, which really is psychedelic in a deep way.
Yeah.
Where you're like, what is this? Is this even music? Like, is this?
Oh,
is this
there's a
okay?
scene where, there's a few scenes where they're high on mushrooms, but there's
Oh,
a
yeah.
scene where they're high on mushrooms, and I personally never been high on mushrooms.
neither.
I've never explored that, but watching this show, I'm like, well, I know how that
Yeah,
feels. 'Cause
it feels like that.
it's
That's how it
crazy.
feels. Yeah.
Wow, wow. Well, listen, both of you, congratulations again on all your success with this
Thank
show. You
you.
Thank you.
deserve every accolade that's coming your way because of it. And really, if anyone is listening to this interview and has gotten this far and somehow hasn't seen or heard Yellowjackets, the music honestly is 50% of the experience. So watch it with headphones on. It's absolutely brilliant. Anna and Craig, I very much appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, and I hope to get to chat with you again
Yeah.
for future seasons of the
Thank
show.
you, Nate. You definitely, I think I can speak for both of
Yeah.
us when I say you made our
You
day.
did. Definitely made our
Fantastic.
day.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to hear it. I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah.
Awesome.